count to 10 and then tweet. Because broadcasting, hiring somebody that represents your company, you better do your homework. You better find out not only are they famous, are they well known, are they infamous, whatever the case may be, but are they going to be trustworthy? Are they going to be responsible? And are they going to care about you as much as you care about them?
Welcome to Celebrity Focus Insiders with your host, Rick Backrack.
Hey, good day. So, the big question today is this. Have you ever experienced the power of a Palmer pitch? And if you haven't, you will today. My guest today is Hall of Fame pitcher and broadcaster Jim Palmer. Jim was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame around 1990. I think it was in 1990. He's also been broadcasting since 1978. Started doing that while he was still playing baseball. Been with the Baltimore Orioles for 57 years. If that's not a record, it's certainly closing in on it. He has authored 4 books, and he spent 19 years. And this is what we're really going to talk about today. Jim has been one of the most successful corporate spokespeople in endorsement history. And if there was an Endorsers Hall of Fame, he'd certainly be in it. Spent 19 years working as the pitchman spokesman for Jockey underwear, 16 years with Nutramax Labs, 12 years with the Money Store. And as Jim was known as Cakes during his playing career and to his friends, he later went on to be the spokesperson for National Pancake Day for IHOP. So Jim, welcome. Glad you're with us. And I want to start today and talk about this. The endorsement business is very often a one and done thing. But we look at your career and 19 years with Jockey and 16 with Nutramax, 12 years with the Money Store. That doesn't happen by accident. How do you achieve that? And what does it take to deliver that type of result for your clients?
It's kind of like pitching where, you got to have a little bit of talent. You have to have a good work ethic. Rick, when I got with the Orioles, I was 18 years old and I was in Aberdeen, South Dakota. We're making about $414 after taxes, living in basements, $90 a month. When it rained, your shoes would float to the corner, $3 a day meal money, 10, 12, 14-hour bus rides. And Cal Ripker Sr. told us, he said, number one, you want to come to the ballpark, never want anybody to outwork you. You want to come to the ballpark and have fun, which means that you're going to, be on a winning team, because we all wanted to go from A ball to Double A to Triple A to the big leagues. We want to get a little bit better every day we come to the ballpark. You want to support each other, which is what teamwork's all about. And probably the most important thing I think he told us, and again, you're pretty impressionable at age 18. There are no such things as shortcuts. So I don't care if you're pitching. I don't really care if you're trying to work for an underwear company or the Money Store, or whatever your endeavor as a broadcaster. Part of worked for ABC for years. With Al Michaels, Tim McCarver. Worked with some of the Howard Goes South, Keith Jackson, some of the great broadcasters that ever broadcast. Did the Little League World Series 13 out of 15 years. Worked with Kurt Gowdy. Worked with you name it. Al Troutwick. Just tons of people. And that same work ethic, the same preparation. And I think, probably the biggest thing with your is working for a client or working for an owner of a baseball team or a manager, got to make them happy. And how do you do that? You listen to what they want, and then you try to fulfill that. So, I used to work, Bill Herman was the director of advertising at Jockey, and I used to always, say, yeah, well, I work for you guys. He said, no, we're a team. And we were, whether it was Erica Feinberg who did the advertising, or the people, that actually arranged all the store appearances. Because, along with the 19 years that I worked for Jockey, I did the ads, but I also did, 20, 25 store appearances throughout the country. And I got to meet people that were not only underwear fans, but also baseball fans. So, I think the one thing that I knew is that kind of like I have a friend who, has shopping centers in Phoenix. And I said, Sam, how do you have such success? He said, well, first of all, we never overpromise. In other words, whatever we promise, we deliver. And I think that's basically what I tried to do, whether I was pitching or whether I was pitching underwear.
How do you describe the role that you play when obviously baseball, you're on the mound, you know what your role is. You're behind the microphone, you know what your role is. When you're pitching a brand, how do you define what your job is in terms of representing that brand?
Well, I think you have to understand, number one, what they want, who they are, what their reputation is. I was one of 9 athletes they used in 1977. Keith Morris did speaking for Sports Illustrated. He called me and he said, hey, we don't want you to do a speech, but we want you to be one of 9 athletes who are going to go up to New York and be part of an underwear shoot. And I think Pete Rose was in it, Steve Carlton, JoJo White. So they had guys from all different sports. So I went up on the Metroliner, $35 round trip. I showed up on time. I was one of the thinner guys, so they gave me the briefest pair of underwear. It was actually a luncheon, so they were actually shooting the photography and actually shooting the ads while a lot of people were having lunch. But I felt fairly embarrassed, but I showed up on time, got there when they told me. Apparently, Rick, they certainly could have gone anywhere and gotten anybody, from the modeling world that looked as good or better than I did, because that's what these guys do. But Bill Herman, as I mentioned before, he was a guy that understood that 75% of men's underwear is bought by women. So let's try to get somebody that women find attractive. And, I did test ads along with Steve Garvey. Somehow, I guess I tested a little bit higher. And so I did the ads in 77, did them again in 78. 79, he didn't use any athletes. 1980, I became the singular spokesperson and did it from 1980 to 1996. And basically, it was, they wanted somebody that's going to be responsible. When he did store appearances, was going to be nice to people, wasn't going to get in any controversy off the field or, during the off season. And I understood that. The great thing was I always felt that I was part of the team for Jockey, just as I did when I played for the Orioles.
These are great points. We've got a lot more to cover. We're going to take a little break and then we'll come back. I've got several more questions. If you're a viewer right now, take a look around your screen. Somewhere you're going to see a button to subscribe. Click that and join us for our future broadcasts as well. And stay with us. We'll be right back with Jim Palmer.
I want to personally thank all the teachers out there, especially at the Goddard School.
A special message of love and appreciation.
It's all about giving kids the best chance to succeed, not just in the classroom, but in life. We are Goddard because we believe that education has the power to make the world a better place. The Goddard school system helps families develop happy, healthy, and successful kids.
Well, that was nice to see Roy there, huh?
Very much so.
So, Jim, I want to dive back in. Jockey, of course, was really a kind of a standard bearer piece of business for you. But here, fast forward all these many seasons later, you're still very active out in the community. You are still an active endorser. I mentioned that you were with Nutramax not that long ago and spent 16 years with them. When you're considering a brand that you want to represent, from a talent perspective, what are you looking for? What do you want to see from those brands?
Well, you want it to be reputable. It's funny, underwear, everybody goes, geez, you did underwear ads. And I said, well, my mom bought Jockey underwear when I was a kid. I never wore never wore Hanes, never wore Fruit of the Loom because Howard Cosell used to advertise that and hang off some airplane, so I wasn't going to wear theirs. So I was very comfortable. And, you know, the other thing is, I mean, Rick, there's safety in numbers. When I did the first Jockey ads, I was 1-9. I wasn't the singular person. I mean, I used to walk off the mound. If I pitched 7 2/3 innings or 8 innings in Kansas City, and I got relieved in the 8th or 9th inning, people would be throwing underwear, and I didn't care as long as it was Jockey. So, you know, I trusted the brands. You know, when I worked for the money store, I was speaking at a luncheon up in Sacramento. They, other than the state of California, were the largest employer because it was a pretty big company. They did about $1.9 billion. So I did their ads for about 6 or 7 years. They went from, I think, $1.9 billion to $9 billion a year. Probably spent, I don't know, $75 to $80 million in advertisements. Used to have a lot of long days, but, you know, they made a difference in people's lives. And, you know, of course, the luncheon was to try to get, you know, be able to handle people with disabilities. And, you know, they were, again, like I said, they were trying to make a difference in the city of Sacramento. And as it turned out, I mean, you know, the way they used to reach people, you know, whether it was student loans or home loans or whatever the case is, you know, they affected people's lives throughout the country. So I think you're always looking for something that you believe in. And I mean, I know that it's easy, you know, maybe nowadays when they pay even more money for commercials. But I think the thing in the longevity that you touched on in our first segment basically was that you developed relationships. I mean, I stayed with the Orioles because, number one, I probably could have gone somewhere else and made a few more dollars. But we had the best organization in baseball the 20 years I played there. Nobody had a better winning percentage. And, you know, I was raising my kids. So, I think quality of life, whether you're a baseball player or whatever job you work in, is very important. And the same with the company that, you know, you work for. You want to have a relationship where you have mutual trust.
You know, we've talked a lot about Jockey, but did you have any other favorite deals throughout your career? Like I said, you've done a lot of big ones and had a lot of relationships that lasted a long time. And that really, I think, is a hallmark for you. Other than the obvious, were there any deals, even one-off deals, that you look back on and say, wow, I really liked that. I really had fun. What were one or two of those and what made them great for you?
Well, the Jockey relationship, because of all the public appearances I would do. You know, it's kind of interesting. I was playing the Bob Hope, and the last day you play 4 different golf courses in Palm Springs with 4 different pros, and, you know, from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I'm leaving the hotel, and Joe Pesci, the actor, says, hey, you mind if I get a ride? We're going out to Bermuda Dunes. And they gave you a money clip, and that's the way you got into the clubhouse. That's how they knew you were one of the contestants. Well, Joe's got a beard. He's doing a movie. He forgets his money clip, and we're trying to get in the front door. And the, you know, volunteer lady, very nice, probably in her 70s or 80s. I'm sorry, I can't let you in there. And I said, well, Joe, why don't we just walk around? He said, oh, I don't know. We don't have security. I'm not really sure. And I said, there's no snipers out here, Joe. So we kind of walked. I said, and this is kind of what you do as a baseball player, maybe not as a Hollywood star. I said, hey, we're kind of late for our tee times. We'll be glad to sign afterwards. And the seat parted. We went through, you know, went and got our shoes, hit a couple of balls, and played the 18 holes. So I think that's kind of what you do as a baseball player. So when I worked with Jockey, it wasn't just in some studio with good lighting, and I don't know if they retouched my underwear, you know, ads or not, even though I'm sure, you know, they might have thought about doing that. But the store appearance were the important things because I got to meet people. Not only, obviously, we're buying Jockey underwear, but we're also baseball fans. And I think the one thing that baseball players maybe have a little bit of an advantage, because we don't wear a helmet, you know, is our relationship with fans, whether it's at the ballpark, whether it's doing autograph shows, whether it's doing underwear and going to Bloomingdale's or Macy's and having 400 or 500 people in line to get your autograph. So I always felt that was probably the best, mainly because of the public appearances that I did.
What advice, Jim, would you give to brand leaders, agency leaders, when they're starting to think about, hey, we want to sign a spokesperson? What advice would you give them? What kind of talent perspective would you want to give to brand leadership to help guide them through their process of choosing the right spokesperson?
Well, I'm not sure if Bill Herman and Jockey knew this when I ended up working for 19 years, but a lot of times, and Ricky, you and I have, I've done appearances. You go somewhere. I mean, I played with Brooks Robinson, 16 Gold Gloves, and I've never gone anywhere where somebody didn't tell me what a great guy he was. Yeah, we knew he was a great baseball player, but he was kind, he was generous, he was, showed up on time. And when I go to appearances, especially 10, 15 years ago, they go, "You were so nice to everybody. You got here on time. Maybe, you were early." Because obviously, remember this, if you're early, you're never late. So if I was going to tell a company, I sat with Lou Holtz once at the White House, and, we were talking about motivating. And, he said, "Listen, I used to always tell my players," he said, "I care about you. Do you care about me? Do you believe in excellence? And, do you believe in doing the best job you can do? But if I'm going to hire somebody, it has to be a two-way relationship. It can't be, I'm going to pay you a bunch of money to represent my company. Hopefully you'll show up on time. Hopefully you'll be responsible if you're a football player, baseball, basketball, whatever, off the field, especially now with social media. I mean, I have a woman producer, Dawn D'Agostino, is one of the best TV producers for baseball around, just happens to be a woman. And when Twitter came into effect, she said, count to 10 and then tweet. Because broadcasting, hiring somebody to represent your company, you better do your homework. You better find out not only are they famous, are they well known, are they infamous, whatever the case may be, but are they going to be trustworthy? Are they going to be responsible? And are they going to care about you as much as you care about them?
You bring up a great point, by the way, something Don told you, and Twitter in general. One of the greatest quotes I saw a few years ago, somebody asked George Clooney why he doesn't have a Twitter account. And his answer was, because I like to drink at night.
Well,
and I thought
exactly.
that was a great answer. Following that same thing, I asked you for your perspective in terms of counsel that you would offer to brands. And I want to go to the same place with other athletes and celebrities. Do you think it's right for everyone? Should everybody be endorsing products or brands? And case in point, Mike Trout. Trout doesn't do anything, and that's by design, and it's not anything more than he's like, yeah, I don't like it, I'm not into it. Do you think it's right for everybody?
No. I mean, obviously, I won 20 games 8 out of 9 years, and I made $550,000 with 175 the last 3 years deferred each year. So I made 375, and that's after winning 20 games 8 out of 9 years. If I played now, I'd make $35 million a year, maybe more, depending on how young I was when I went into the streak. So I made, from Jockey, probably almost as much as I made when I started as I did from pitching for the Orioles. Until Edward Bennett Williams, who was one of the best lawyers, owned part of the Redskins, bought the Orioles, and he said, "I get $1,000 an hour. Why should you pitch for less than you're worth?" And I said, "I wish you had bought the club 10 years earlier." But so the bottom line is, back then, I didn't want to leave Baltimore. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, quality of life is important. When you're raising two young girls, two daughters, Jamie and Kelly, and, they were born in Baltimore right after we won the first World Series. Jamie was born in November of that year in 1966. So they were very happy. Baltimore, you go out to the suburbs, is about as beautiful country as you can see. So they were getting good educations. They were happy. I played on a good team. We won. I knew what my teammates were going to do. I knew the organization was one of the best. So there was really no reason to really leave and go somewhere else. So you look for other avenues to make some income. So because other players were, to be quite honest, more money. If you're Mike Trout, to go back to your point, what's he, $36.5 million? Now, I will tell you right now, I bet Mike Trout does a lot of things off the field in his community, whether it's, because I know he's from New Jersey, but I'm sure he does a lot of things in Anaheim. I'm sure he makes a difference in people's lives, not only as a baseball player, but otherwise. So just remember, and you know this as well as anybody, it's not always how much revenue can you make. It's what you can do. And, it's a very funny thing. Just imagine you're in an airport and you're a baseball fan and you recognize Jim Palmer and, you live in the past. So you go, hey, God, you were Jim Palmer. And I go, hey, good, how are you? You're a big baseball fan. It's just amazing the ability, the power you have to make people happy, put a smile on their face by just being pleasant. I learned that from Brooks Robinson. Same amount of time it takes to be rude to somebody, you can be nice. So whether it's endorsements or whatever, I think the most important thing for athletes, and the vast majority do this, especially the stars, they make a difference in their community. First thing I ever in Baltimore, they said, if you're going to live here, you know what? Be a good citizen, make a difference in the community. And, I've been able to do that for the last 55, 57 years, even though I don't live full time in Baltimore anymore.
No, well, you raise a brilliant point, and no, it's not about the money. It's you do these things for other reasons. Before we wrap up, Jim, I do want to mention for our viewers, Jim Palmer's been one of the most active guys in his community for as long as we've known each other, and beyond that, supporting organizations like Multiple Sclerosis Society, MD, and more recently, his activism for Autism Speaks, which is very personal to Jim. Somebody told me, and you and I have talked about this in the past, there's a big difference between what we do to make a buck and what we do to make a living. And, you and I have talked about that, but activism like this and community support, I know, is so important. Doesn't matter if you're an athlete or if you're an entertainer, musician, what have you. Tell us a little bit about your involvement in things like Autism Speaks and why you do it.
Well, my stepson has autism, and Spencer's going to be 26 tomorrow, as a matter of fact, and lovely, smart. He's just, he has not severe autism, but it's just enough where he'll probably be the ward of, me and my wife for the rest of his life. Brilliant kid, photographic memory, knows everything about any train in the world. I mean, the world. It's his passion, but now he's getting a little bit older. He's looking at the world news. So, obviously when you have somebody that and your family is affected by autism, you try to make a difference. I was involved with cystic fibrosis because one of my dear friends had two kids with CF. We're going back into the 60s. The average lifespan for somebody with cystic fibrosis, boy and girl, was maybe 12 or 13. Now it's almost 40. So, and I used to say, well, what if my kids had cystic fibrosis? And they didn't. They were healthy. Both of my daughters were healthy. So you always try to look around. I think it's kind of easy to have empathy and compassion for people that are, whether they're going through cancer or they have autism or, my wife's family has dementia and Alzheimer's. So everything that we talk about and everything that, what you turn on TV about raising money for, breast cancer or autism or Alzheimer's or whatever the case is, it's going to affect somebody you know. So you just have to look around, and it just goes back about trying to be, when my youngest daughter, Kelly, she went off to Europe, and I said, Kelly, and she was young. She was like 12 years old, and she was going to kind of babysit and have a good time. I said, Kelly, look around, peripheral vision. The world's not about you. And she came back a different girl. So I think that's the kind of way that I think we'd like to live our life. It's not just about Jim Palmer. It's about what you can do to maybe make somebody else's life a little bit better, or how you can bring them happiness or whatever. And I mean, in my world, as I mentioned, I'm in an airport and I say hello to somebody, and even in Cooperstown, Rick, when your autograph's worth something, somehow it became valuable. But if you don't want to sign autographs, it's so simple to say, hey, why don't we take a picture? And people think, geez, Jim Palmer, what a nice guy. Well, that's kind of out there still for debate. But the bottom line is, I think everybody can make more of an impact in their community than we do. And if you already do a lot, thank you so much for doing it. And otherwise, maybe you just want to think about doing a little bit more, as much as you can.
Jim, thank you so much. You've been a really awesome guest, and we've been great friends for a long time. If you haven't read this book, I'm going to suggest people go out and get it. It's 9 Innings to Success by Jim Palmer. There's great stuff in here. This, of course, today, really our subject today was all about connecting famous people with famous brands. That was our focus here. So we hope everybody will do that. As I mentioned before, look around somewhere around this screen. There's a button that says subscribe. I hope you'll watch Celebrity Focus Insiders. We've got new episodes releasing every week. Jim Palmer, thank you very, very much. We'll see you soon.
Okay, take care, Rick.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Celebrity Focus Insiders, connecting famous people with famous brands. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date and check out our past episodes at celebrityfocus.com.